All right, we got a real problem here. So behind me is a 2011 BMW 335 diesel. It was towed in for a crank no start. Not a typical problem with this car. So what we did was try to crank it, and it's got a very, very slow crank. Like, it's having a really hard time turning the engine. We checked the battery. Battery is good. We put a battery charger on the car just to make sure. Tried to crank it, same kind of thing. Got a really slow crank. The way this engine works, it's got two chains. At the crankshaft, it has a sprocket. The chain goes up and drives the fuel pump. Then that fuel pump has another chain that drives the intake camshaft. The intake camshaft drives the exhaust camshaft via a gear. So what I'm gonna do is remove the vacuum pump. I wanna check to make sure that the camshaft on the exhaust side is actually rotating when I turn the engine. If it's rotating, then I do know that the timing chain up to that point is good. So the timing chain looks good. I can see all the teeth. These two little dots that you see right here, those two dots right there are the alignment marks. So when this is at top dead center, those two dots will match up with a single dot on the intake gear. All right, looks like the camshaft is rotating, so we're all good there. I'm gonna make sure we're getting fuel pressure. This is the high pressure fuel line. I'm just gonna kind of crack it free, put a rag around it, have somebody crank it and see if we got fuel pressure. Hey, Joey, will you crank this for me, please? Go ahead. All right, stop. Okay, the fuel pressure is good, so I'm going to pull the valve cover off so we can check the timing. Before I do that though, I'm going to go ahead and pull the oil filter out. What I want to do is separate the fins of the oil filter, take a look in there and see if I see any metal debris or particles. If I do, then I know that we've got a catastrophic failure. And looking at it, I don't really see anything, so I guess we're good. And let's go ahead and take the valve cover off. Real quick, let me show you guys this. Every car that's in my shop and has the hood open will have this clamp on the hood struts. You might think because every car we work on, the hood struts are bad. Well, that's not the case. In fact, you can see that the hood is being held up by these struts here. We do it as a precaution. We've had, on occasion, these hood struts will be weak. So initially it'll hold up the hood, but then you're working and then bam, the hood closes down on you. So we use these as a safety precaution to save the car and to save our head. You might think, well, why don't you just use vice grips? Well, the problem with vice grips is they may damage this shaft here, which will then damage the seal. This particular clamp has a brass fitting that's soft on the end, and you can purchase them from Amazon. I'll put a link down in the description below. All right, let's get back to work. Before I pull the valve cover off, I got to pull off this intake manifold. Before I pull the intake manifold off, I got to pull off all this trim up here. Okay, the next step is to pull out the injectors. Now, when I pull the return lines off, you see they have these super tiny O-rings right here. So if you guys are ever doing this, make sure you pay attention to these O-rings. I'm gonna go ahead and make sure when we go back together, they'll get new ones. The injectors have a special tool that you use to pull them out. So let's get the injector toolkit. This is our injector extraction kit. I'll put a link in the description if you guys are interested in getting this kit. It's really nice. Basically, this shaft slides through the hammer. It's got the different fittings. This fitting right here will fit on our injector. It screws onto this shaft, and then we screw it right onto the injector, give it a couple yanks, and it's ours. So these injectors have these copper crush rings on here, and those get replaced each time you remove them, along with this O-ring here. And like I said, we'll replace these little tiny O-rings here. And you can see the numbers on these injectors. So those numbers are coded for this car. So this injector is indexed for cylinder number 1. We got to make sure we keep track of which cylinder they came from. Look how much carbon buildup is on the tip of that injector. It's a dirty tip.
Ew, that's gross!
All right. Now that the valve cover is off, it's extremely important that I clean each of these ports. The injector sits down in here, and you remember that O-ring on the side of the injector? Well, it sits right on this shoulder in here. So we want to make sure that this is super clean. This is an intake port, injector, intake, injector. You get the idea. And you can see the carbon build up a little bit. This one's actually not that bad. He does have methanol injection, and it basically steam cleans the engine. So the intake valves on these are actually super clean. Now that I got the valve cover removed, I got to rotate the engine to check the timing. However, I've run into a problem. The harmonic balancer has 4 bolts, and those bolts are supposed to fit into these holes of this special tool. And the problem is the bolts that are in the harmonic balancer do not match these holes. The crankshaft actually has hex head bolts, and it's supposed to have Torx bolts like these. What I got to do now is order the correct bolts. So I'll have to do that tonight. Hopefully they'll get here tomorrow, and then we can try to turn the engine by hand. In the meantime, let's see what the guys are up to. What's up, Joey? What you got going on over here?
Oil pan gasket's leaking, so dropping the oil pan, replacing the gasket.
Oh yeah.
Just about ready to come out.
You're holding it like it's your baby. All right, this is where it gets tricky. You don't want the gasket to slide off. We got to get the bolts set in. All right, I'm going to try to hold the camera and help you. We'll see how this goes. Come back your way a little bit. There you go. Nice. All right, that one's snug. I'm glad I can help. You're welcome. Neil's over here working on an Audi A6, a 3.2 liter V6, and it looks like he's preparing everything to get the engine out. He's got all his tools spread out here. He's ready to pull the engine out, so we got the engine table all set up, and I assist him in bringing it down to make sure that everything is clearing properly. And just like that, we got the engine out. Subframe mounts are shot.
I mean, everything's shot on this.
Everything's shot. I mean, there's nothing wrong with this engine. Oh yeah. Nice. Do you want some help? I'm just gonna watch you. So Neil, why are we taking the engine out of this?
So we got no compression on cylinder 6 here. Needs a lot of work. Coolant leaks, oil leaks, not worth fixing, not worth digging into. So we got a quality used engine. We're gonna refresh it, do the common problems, fix those, and make sure they're not a problem. New gaskets, spark plugs, water pump, things like that.
Cool, so we'll get the refreshened engine back in there, and the customer should be good to go for a while.
That's the goal.
It's tomorrow, and guess what? I got my bolts. You can see the differences right here, the old one versus the new one. And oh, look at that. It fits in the tool as it should. Very nice. Okay, we got the 4 bolts in. We got them torqued down. They go to 40 Newton meters and 120 degrees. I now have the tool on there, so let's go ahead and turn the engine over. Oh, hold on. That's not good. That ain't good at all. All right, we got a real problem here. Okay, I'm trying to rotate the engine. It should turn very easily. This thing is fighting me. I can't do a full revolution on it. Okay. Figure out what I'm going to do from here. Even though the initial inspection of the oil filter didn't show anything, I went ahead and took the filter out, cut the ends off, spread it out, and I flipped it over so I could see the inside of the filter. And I do see a couple little spots, some metal flakes. Not a good sign. I've already drained the oil, put my scope through the drain plug hole, and I couldn't really see anything in there either, at least nothing definitive. In conclusion, the engine will not turn by hand. I did inspect the valve springs, didn't see anything broken. When I was able to turn the engine a little bit, the back of the cams, I wanted to make sure that they rotated. They did, which tells me there's no broken cams. My suspicion is there's a bottom end issue. I don't think it's a bent rod. The customer said that he drove it to the store, came home, everything was fine, shut it off the next morning. When he tried to start it, he got the very slow crank. I can't see a bent rod being caused by the starter. Like, let's say the injector was stuck open, fill a cylinder with fuel, he went to start it. On a gas engine, definitely that could happen. On a diesel engine, not likely. Problem is more than likely a spun bearing. My thinking is while he was driving it home, maybe the bearing spun, and when he shut it off, it now cooled down and it's stuck. That's my guess. Whether it's a main bearing, rod bearing, I don't know. We'd have to pull the oil pan off to check it out. It's a pretty lengthy process to do that. The customer has the option to do that. I've advised him that it's probably not in his best financial interest to do that because at the end of the day, he's gonna need a new engine. If he decides to replace this engine, we're gonna take this one apart and we'll find out exactly what the cause was. So my thinking is it's a spun bearing. I know I've got some really smart technicians that watch this channel, so if you guys have any other ideas, let me know. Thanks for watching. Thanks for subscribing. See you next time.